On my first episode on this podcast, I talked to Richard about how excited I was for all the things that we plan on doing with shared practices. What I was talking about when I said that was the Ownership Accelerator. The Ownership Accelerator is an online course that Richard and I have been planning for a very long time now, going over the specifics of buying a practice, a comprehensive look at all the steps and everything needed to successfully buy a practice. Well, the wait is almost over. We're going to be releasing the Ownership Accelerator in a little bit less than a month. And for those of you who've been waiting on our waiting list for more than a year now, the time has come for you to finally have access to our online course. We're going to be offering an exclusive launch deal to the first 50 individuals to sign up for that course. And as a thank you for those on our waiting list for being patient, we're going to offer that to you first. If you're interested in joining the people on the waiting list for the Ownership Accelerator, I'll leave a link in the show notes below and you can still join that waiting list and have access to that deal first. I'll talk more about the course later in the episode.
Okay, welcome back to the Shared Practices podcast. We have in these next two episodes a really detailed blueprint for the actual process of transitioning into a practice. And you guys know we love details. We love going in deep. We love getting into the nitty gritty. And this guest that you brought on, Tanner, first off, just share with us, George, how did you meet Tanner and how did you get him on the podcast?
Well, I've kind of started, on Dental Town is, where I've been until now. And, I have a lot of friends that I've known on Dental Town for years now. And so I think you'll start seeing them on the podcast as they become relevant. Huh. And Tanner is one of those guys that, I've been friends with since I was a D1. And, we're really good friends. I talked about it in the episode, so I won't get too much into it. But yeah, he's a really great guy, and he's accomplished a whole lot since I've known him. And he's a great resource.
Well, cool. Well, we are going to get his perspective over two episodes on this process. And then I've been talking with Will Little, Hunter Smith's partner. And if we can get Dr. Will Little on as well to get his perspective, we're going to have a couple of really detailed prototypes of how to just do this whole process from guys who own multiple practices. So I couldn't be happier because I feel like this is what this season was supposed to be all about. And it has been. We're just on this next step of, okay, now that you've got a practice that you like, you made an offer and you're going to buy it and the financing is going through, what's next? So we'll get into it.
I have with me today a good friend of mine, Tanner Applegate. In my first episode with Richard, season 2, episode 9, where I talk about demographics, towards the end of that episode, I kind of talk about this angst that I have when, I started this process of learning and connecting with people so young in my career. I was a first-year dental student when I started doing this, and not the podcast, but kind of everything else. And, I met a lot of great people, and one of those was Tanner Applegate. And Tanner and I was a first-year dental student, and, he was just a young businessman who, at that point, hadn't accomplished a whole lot. Hopefully Tanner doesn't mind me saying that, but at the time, we had met each other, and, just like I had Derek Williams on, it was a friend of mine that at one point we were both dental students. Now he's accomplished and I'm still a dental student. It's kind of that unusual feeling where I'm having Tanner on as an expert, somebody who now has 5 practices, and I'm still a dental student. So it's kind of funny to have him on. Sorry for the long intro. I like to introduce my friends that way. So Tanner, how you doing?
Good, George. Thanks so much for having me. I wouldn't say that you're not accomplished. I just think that you're still in school. It's a little bit different. I would definitely say that you're accomplished, though.
I'm just giving myself a hard time, Tanner. I appreciate you coming on. You've done a whole lot since we started communicating. And, I think you offer a valuable perspective on a subject that our listeners are maybe a little bit nervous about, is the idea of, all the paperwork, all the things that happen from the time you decide on a practice till the time that you actually step in and you're the owner.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about. This is a topic that I feel like we have had a lot of experience with in the last few years doing. So it's going to be great.
So Tanner, why don't you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself? You have a more untraditional background in that you didn't go to dental school. So kind of talk about it a little bit, who you are, where you're located, and, how many practices you guys have.
Yeah, so George, kind of like you alluded to, you and I met a long time ago back when we went to breakaway seminars together. And that was kind of my initial learning, I guess you could say, in the dental world. So I always wanted to be a dentist in undergrad. I studied business because that's what I'm passionate about. After I got out of dental school, I needed to do an intern. I mean, after I got out of my undergrad, I needed to do an internship. So I contacted my cousin who was working out in Missouri. As I worked with him in his dental office, that's when we went to Breakaway, and I learned that there's a lot of opportunity in the dental industry without having a dental degree. And so I like I said, I was passionate about business. I wasn't too passionate about the science behind dentistry. And so I decided to partner up with my cousin, he's an excellent clinician. He's a great leader. And so with that, we decided to move out here to Denver, and we started our company, which is now called Dentistry Making a Difference. And we didn't want to be like every other DSO that was just focused on numbers and getting things done. And we were very culture and mission driven. So just like our title kind of alludes to, we're dentistry making a difference. Everything that we point to is to make a difference in the lives of other people. So we don't have production goals that we work towards. We have charity goals that we work towards. How much can we give back to the community within this certain amount of time? And so it's a kind of a unique model, but I think that because it's a unique model, our growth has really just been unbelievable. I mean, like you said, we started last June, and it's been a year and a few months now, and we're already up to 5 practices, and we have about 3 more that have come and knock on our doors that want to join because of this unique model. So we're new to it. There's a lot of things that we still don't know, but we definitely, I would say that we have done well in what we have learned so far.
And you alluded to something that I think is really valuable for our listeners is, you've done this 5 times in a year now, and you're going to do it likely, more times in the future. And, for people who are doing these types of things, closing out practices, for most people, it happens once in their career, so they can't really talk about it. But, you've done it 5 times now. And Richard's going to have another guest on talk about the same topic who's also done it 5 times. And so I think you guys who are in group DSO multi-locations have a lot of experience and value to offer our audience on closing deals and getting deals done and the process that it takes, because you guys have done it before. So I think we'll just go ahead and start there. Tanner, is there anything else you wanted to say about yourself before we dived in?
Nope, I think that was enough.
Okay, so I think where we're going to start is the place where you have a practice selected that you want to buy, but you don't really know kind of the next step. You don't know what to get before you decide the practice, after you submit like an LOI or an offer, and then we'll go from there. So Tanner, what kind of stuff do you guys like to have and evaluate before you actually submit a formal offer, an LOI on a practice?
So the one thing that you said that I just want to make sure that we're on the same page is this is a practice that you're looking at. You haven't decided yet that you want to buy it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when we see a practice that we kind of see from the outside looking in, it kind of fits what we are looking for. The things that we ask for would be the normal standard accounting things. So tax returns, profit and loss statements, and then balance sheet statements. And honestly, based off of those 3 documents, we're able to draw any conclusion that we want to before we sign an LOI. So after we get all those documents, I will go through and I'll kind of dig deeper into the profit and loss and the taxes, and I'll see where their expenses lie compared to with the way that we see that our P&Ls are for other practices. And then at that point, I can see, well, this doctor is either way off or he's within a similar range to us. And I think that we can only go in and improve it. So we'll move forward with an LOI. For us, with the brokers in our area that we've worked with, we've only done brokerage deals so far. So in those situations, an LOI is, we kind of view it as putting our place in line. It's not necessarily that we've committed to buy this practice, because there's still due diligence that you have to do after an LOI. But we submit an LOI as soon as we were even interested in buying this practice, just because it lets the broker know, okay, we want to get in line. It's kind of a first come, first serve from the groups that we've worked with. And so we'll get that in, and then we'll do a lot more in-depth analysis after that.
So to kind of maybe reframe that conversation a little bit. The LOI has a like a 60-day non-compete, or it's not a non-compete, but what would you call it? Like an exclusivity agreement wherein the signed LOI goes in place, then they're not allowed to show anybody else that practice for like 60 days. Is that right?
I think it really depends on the broker. I know that the brokers that we've worked with, the ones that we've done the most deals with, they view LOI as just kind of putting yourself in line. But I've gone in and I've seen practices that have LOIs on them, and they're fresh LOIs within the last week. They view it as, well, we're going to go ahead and just keep showing it just in case this person falls through. And it's amazing to me how many people actually have fallen through on deals. I mean, there's one practice we looked at last year. We were really excited about it. We put in an LOI. We were second in line. Well, that first person, it fell through, I think, within like the last month or so. And so because we had an LOI in last year, we've now been bumped up to first place. And so I think it really depends a lot on the company that you're working with.
Okay. And so you would recommend, because I noticed you didn't say anything about production reports there. So you would just recommend just kind of the bare necessities to get an LOI on the table. And then since it's such a loose agreement, it can be changed later.
Correct. Yeah. So for production reports, we do that as our in-depth analysis after we put in the LOI, because some sellers are a little bit hazy and they're a little bit weary about what they give out before an LOI is in place. So we like to get an LOI on the table as soon as possible.
I'm really happy you said that, because I had the same experience when I was dealing with my seller. Was the amount of information I was given was kind of guarded, and as it should be. You don't just kind of hand out this personal information to everybody. But I think just getting an offer in place, then you can kind of do, and I think ask for more reports.
Right, definitely.
Okay, so now you've gotten the P&Ls, the very basic financials, the tax returns to verify the P&Ls, and you now submitted an offer. So let's just say you get bumped up and you're now first in line. Your LOI has been, I guess, accepted, or whatever you want to call it. What happens from there?
So from there, our biggest thing, our number one thing that we look at is culture fit. I listened to one of your earlier podcasts about lifestyle practice. I think that for a one-time buyer, that's huge. It's huge to be able to go in and be able to see, am I going to mesh well with this doctor more so than anything? I mean, you can go in and you can learn the different procedures that he's currently doing, and if he's willing to stay on, even more so. But I think that if you guys come in and you have two different mindsets completely, one is very cultural driven and the other one's very production driven, I don't think it's going to be a very good fit. So we go in, we meet the doctor. We usually will take him out to dinner and we just pick his brain as far as tell us about the staff, tell us about the history, what makes your office successful. Tell us about the demographics of your patients. Like, what kind of meetings are you holding with the team? Just different things like that. What kind of goals do you have? And at that point, we can really get a feel for, is this office going to be a good fit for our culture? Alongside that, I mean, we obviously are doing the due diligence in the background. We'll go into the practice. We'll pull reports depending on the software. Our favorite is to be able to get into, obviously, an open dental practice, but not a lot of the older docs actually, unfortunately, don't do open dental. But we'll go in, we'll pull the production reports, we'll do production by procedure, just kind of see how that fits. A lot of that stuff, though, you can really tell what's being done also on the P&L as far as quantity. It is good to have a breakdown of like the hygiene percentage for the practice. There's a lot of different things that we just run in the background, but you've already heard a lot about due diligence in the other episodes, so we're not as big of an expert in that. We're more of a cultural fit kind of group.
And when you guys acquire a practice, you're employing the senior doctor, correct?
So out of the 5 deals that we've currently done, not one of them has been able to stay. We've done them through brokers, so they're kind of already checked out by the time they approach a broker. Of the 3 that we have on the table, 2 of them are selling docs that want to stay on. So we haven't actually experienced that yet, but it is the model that we want to move towards in the future.
So I'm not trying to be challenging you here, but if the seller is not staying on, that's kind of most transitions that our audience will be going through. Why is the culture important to you?
So to give you an example, So our fourth and fifth practice, it was a doctor that was very heavily production based. I mean, it was a very toxic culture amongst the staff because he would play the staff off of each other, just really trying to bump up the numbers. We didn't really look into that very much. And so when we got into that office, it was amazing how much problems that created for us because we didn't look at the culture fit. And so the staff, the patients would come in and they were just so used to being sucked up at from every angle, just trying to get these benefits from the staff that it really, they would come in, we'd have, out of the 5 acquisitions, we'd never had this before. We'd have patients come in and say, "Oh, my doctor's not here, I'm leaving." And they would walk out the door even though they were already there for their appointment. And we'd never experienced that before. And it was just because of the culture that was created in that office that wasn't what matched our model that we were used to. And so it was really, it threw us for a loop.
So patients would leave the practice just because, I don't understand. I'm not getting how the doctor's culture affected the patient's behavior, like when they came for the new doctor's appointment.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard thing to explain more so than feel out. So the staff, he was one that had a lot of staff turnover, which should have been a red flag for us beforehand. But the staff is really what caused this culture of they were playing off of each other to try and get more production because they were very production based and they were incentivized for it. And the seller doc wanted to, he was very money driven as well. And it's something that's hard to explain, but it really just it created this problem that we have right now. And so our production has actually dipped coming into this practice because the culture has just been so different. I don't know how to explain it better.
Okay. And I think, I'm just trying to give the listener something to look out for. I think maybe staff turnover would be something. So would you say that if there's a lot of staff turnover, that's something that you would do during that due diligence process also as a culture analysis?
Definitely. Definitely staff turnover is a red flag. Definitely.
Okay. Yep. So then you've established culture is a good fit. Now, what else? So you pulled their production reports. You've established culture is a good fit. We already verified the tax returns and the profit and loss statements. So what else are you doing to prepare for the, sign of the asset purchase agreement and all those things that go into place?
So after that point, if you decided to move forward, you've committed that you want this practice, which I think is the biggest indicating factors to move forward is, okay, this is one practice that I want, so we're going to go ahead and move forward with it. I've given you a list, George, that I hope that we'll be able to get out to the listeners as well. It's the acquisition checklist that we use, and the one that we sent out, it's broken down into 2 sections. So when the acquisition date is set going forward, and then after the acquisition date, what kind of things need to be done. And this is where things start picking up and it really starts getting busy with an acquisition. So there's different categories for each things that need to be done. When you've officially decided, okay, we're going to go ahead and move forward with it, there's things that you need to start getting ready managerially. So these are things like you need to register with your Secretary of State. You need to get your tax ID number. You need to set up your bank account, credit cards. You need to get the lease finalized, which is a whole podcast episode in itself that you guys have already gone over. And then you need to have your asset purchase agreement gone over with your lawyer. And then different things like apply for a group MPI number if you plan on bringing on any associates at all. So if the practice can fit a multiple doctors, so if you have more than like 3 or 4 chairs, I would definitely just at the beginning apply for a group MPI. And then you need to sign up for your personal insurances. So whether that be business, you got to have your business overhead, your malpractice, and then you also have to have your workers' comp.
And how fast does this stuff kind of take place? So you've signed, or so you've agreed somewhere in your due diligence, you've decided, okay, I'm going forward with this one. How long does it take you to do everything that you just listed?
You can get all of that stuff done in a week. The things that definitely take time would be your lease. There's a lot of negotiating that goes back and forth. So it depends on your landlord and their lawyer and how responsive they are. We've had leases go through within a couple of days, and we've also had leases that have taken up to a month. So it really just kind of depends on them. that one's kind of one that's out of your control. And then the asset purchase agreement, if you've got a responsive lawyer, we've also gotten that taken care of within a week or so. And the rest of that stuff is very predictable. It's all, you can do it within a few days.
More of that after the break, but first, a word from our sponsor. Okay, now that you've realized that your neck hurts not because of the weight of your loops or the angle of declination, that it hurts because you're looking over your telescopes, the next part that should frustrate you about your current pair of loops is that there's this wasted space between the bottom of the frame and where it's comfortable to look down. So I want you to look down when you're wearing your loops. So look below the loops, below the frame. And if you look down really far, like as far as you can without moving your head, eventually that's strained, that's uncomfortable. You can't have the loops that far down. You can't hold that for a while. There's this whole zone of comfortable space between the bottom of the frames and where the loops could be placed that's wasted because of your current frame. Q Optics has designed not only a new frame, but also a way of measuring the space of your face. They actually take like a face bow of you and take a picture of it and put it in the computer. There's this little contraption with green dots that you wear on a pair of glasses, and they take a photo from the front and a photo from the side. And they've got some fancy names for it, but essentially they're doing a map of your face, a 3D map of your face, and maximizing the amount of frame that can dip down and they can put loops in. Why wouldn't you maximize that for every single person? Well, it's easy. It's easier to just buy a bunch of preset frames than it is to make custom frames for everybody. So if you're interested in maximizing the real estate that you have available, you can send an email to sales@qoptics.com with the promo code SP16 for $100 off a pair of loops or $300 off of a loop and light combo. It's time for you to stop wasting all that space.
Okay, just to, you made comment of it being available. This checklist that we're going over will be available as a link in the show notes, or if you're on our Facebook group, then it'll be shared when the episode is announced. So either way, you'll have access to it. So we'll continue on. So Tanner, in your group, these are functions because you label them as managerial. Are they labeled managerial because that's something you're doing, or are they labeled managerial because of another reason?
They're managerial just in the fact that you can't really go and have somebody else sign up for your malpractice insurance. You can't. They're just things that I feel like as owners need to be taken care of. Other things can, like the next section on this list is technology, and before you have actually taken over the practice, this technology section mainly is I would hand this list to the selling doctor and say, hey, I need you to make a username and password list of all this information. And obviously some of them might not feel comfortable giving it to you before you actually acquire, but as long as you get it to them before they leave, they'll be able to get that information together and get that to you.
Okay, so the next section we're going to go over is technology. And so you would suggest that we give them this list and we tell them, if you're not comfortable now, then just have it all ready for me and then give it to me at closing or whatever?
Correct, yeah. It's amazing how these little tiny things get looked over. I mean, we got into a practice, we were having internet issues. I needed to go into the router. Well, the seller didn't even know what the router password is. So if you gave them that information beforehand, if they don't know what it is, then they can go ahead and take the time to look into it beforehand instead of whenever you actually need that information.
Gotcha. And can you kind of go through that list of the things that you asked for?
Yeah, so for usernames and passwords, computers, so especially the server, if you can get into the server, you can usually change every other username and password. But if every computer has a different login information, that would be good to have. Router login and password, like we said before, it's amazing how many times you'll need to access that. Practice management software, especially the admin accounts for those. Online logins for insurances. If the doctor is retiring, chances are they're not doing any kind of online insurance information, but if they are, it would be good to know. That way you can pull up previous EOBs from when they were there if needs be. Imaging software, sometimes the imaging software will have its own login information. Alarm systems, that's obvious. The clinical stuff, so Invisalign, 6-month smiles, etc. That also falls under, like, if they're using Patterson or Henry Schein to do any of their supply ordering, it's good to have history of what they ordered. So you're not going to order under the same account, but it is good to be able to have access to that. Email addresses are a big thing because a lot of people will still have the old office email address. As long as the email address isn't actually like the doctor's name or whatever, and it's actually a branded email address, there's no problem in keeping that email address. You just want to make sure that you do have access to it, even if you do change it. And then also the websites and any social media accounts that they have are pretty straightforward.
And do you change these passwords after the acquisition?
It honestly does. It depends on who it is.
The seller?
Yeah. So we'll change them if we need to. If we feel like there's going to be problems. Honestly, we probably should change them all anyway. We just haven't.
Okay. Yeah, small question, but I was just wondering.
Yeah,
so
that's a good question.
At what point, so now just kind of, let's take us back to the timeline a little bit. So the point where you've registered for all your managerial things, you've asked for all your passwords of all the accounts. Where are we in terms of how far away from the time that we had the LOI?
So I don't think that there's ever too early of a time to ask for these things. I think as long as you know your acquisition date and things are progressing, this information is there's never too early or too late to ask for this information, as long as you get it before you actually get into the office.
And then what's the typical time from, like, when, if you're buying your next practice, you're like, okay, sign my LOI here. If I had to estimate when the acquisition date would be, it would be so far away from LOI.
I think that really just depends on the seller and the buyer. I mean, for us, we've done it where right now we've pushed out acquisition dates till the end of the year. And then we've had some where we've closed within the week. It really is just dependent on how bad the seller wants to get out or how bad you want to get in.
Okay, so it's very much open for whatever timelines are needed in terms of the people involved.
Definitely.
Okay, so at what point do you guys, the next one on here is team members. So at what point do you kind of tell the team, I'm assuming that if you're meeting the team, you've already told them what's happening. So when do you guys do that?
So this is variable also from cell to cell. This is one that we put on this list after our last acquisition. So we've never actually met the team before, but this last acquisition, the team caused so many problems that for us moving forward, we are going to for sure meet the team before we take over an office. And so I don't actually have any experience as far as it works well a month before, it works well a week before. Our first acquisition, whenever we had everything set up, we just needed to move to the area. We met the team, I think, like 3 weeks beforehand. And that was a huge benefit to both us and the team, because the team was able to sit there and ask us as many questions as they wanted, and it let their fears kind of subside. Because it's amazing if, as a team member, if you have a lot of unknowns and question marks in your job, how much you start looking for other options. And that's not something you want to do if you want to keep that team on. Yeah, the sooner you can meet with them and the sooner that you can answer any of their questions, the better.
I've heard some pretty, I don't know, it seems like when I talk to another doctor, the team seems to ask very, like, kind of simple questions that you're surprised they're even concerned about. What kind of questions, you've done this a few times now, what kind of questions do you get from the team?
They honestly want to know that what they had is still stable. So we've had questions like, are you guys going to respect our hours off? Are you guys going to continue to work the same hours? Are you going to accept the same insurances? They honestly ask the same questions that their patients are going to ask. We had one recently that asked if we would respect the time off that they had accrued with their seller. And we try and come in and be as fair as possible. So we do. So if they had accrued 2 weeks of paid vacation with the seller and they never used it, we'll go ahead and respect that as well.
Oh, that's nice of you. I'd assume that you kind of have to, though, if I'm thinking about it from the team member's perspective.
Yeah, we've heard of acquisitions where they make the seller doctor pay out any paid time off, and then they kind of move forward with their benefits at the time of acquisition. We don't do that. We try and be as fair as possible to everyone involved, but there are alternatives to it.
Gotcha. Okay, so no crazy questions from the team then, but it's nice to kind of just give them the stability to know that their job is there, and so they don't leave.
Right, definitely.
Okay, and so then what else do you guys do?
So the next one we have on here is clinical. These things are good to do beforehand, before you actually take over. Things like a setup for our supply ordering. We personally go with Getz Dental, and then discuss completion continuance of outstanding cases. So if the seller doctor is selling and then walking away, chances are he's going to have, if he does any bigger cases, or if he does anything like Invisalign or 6-month smiles, those are going to be conversations that need to be had. Are you going to be reimbursed from? How many outstanding cases do they have? Are there any cases that are specific to the seller doctor that he needs to come back and complete? Those type of things.
So what about simple crown seats? Is that something that's done by the new doc, or?
Yeah, those crown seats are usually something that, if done right, if the doctor has a good clinical skill about him, it should be just like a 15-20 minute seat, which is a great time to introduce yourself as a new doctor. We usually don't require any reimbursement for a crown seat.
Okay. At what point do you guys set up the marketing, pre-closing then, or pre-acquisition date?
So marketing, we do things like purchase our domain name. We will also, one thing that I forgot to put on this list, but we also will send out a transition letter before we take over. And then we also just kind of get everything ready. So we have the new office email. We create a new website. The websites are going to take a long time to build. Therefore, we start doing it before we actually take over. So that way, hopefully, it can be done as close to the takeover date as possible. And that also, it depends on the office that you're getting into, right? I mean, we say that over and over again. But if the office we're getting into has an amazing website and it's got SEO to it, and it's ranked pretty high already on Google search, there's no reason to change that. You just have to go in and make a few tweaks and put yourself in there. But if you're getting into a practice and you're completely rebranding it, or if you are doing a lot of large changes to it, then I think a new website is very fitting. Or if they don't have a website at all, obviously.
Okay, and I'm a techie, you're a techie. So I'm just going to kind of ask you a little bit about how you assess the website of the existing practice.
Yeah, so we kind of have a different model. Because we're a part of a group, we like all of our offices to have similarly branded offices. They're not all named the same, but they're the brand and the colors and the font, they're all similar. So we'll go through and we'll change out the website usually no matter what, because we want it to fit with the rest of our offices. I think for one person coming into one office, it obviously changes it dramatically. I mean, if you can go in and you can search for your name in search for the office name in your area and you pop up on the first page, I wouldn't do any dramatic changes at that point. I would make sure that you just fine tune it.
So are you saying the practice name, like if it's This Road Family Dentistry, then if I search This Road Family Dentistry and that result comes up first, then you wouldn't change anything?
No, I would type in dentist city. And if it pops up, then great. Because if someone's typing in your name to look for you, chances are they already know your office. And those aren't the people that you need as new patients. But if you can type in dentist in your city and then you pop up at the top, that means you have some good SEO built into that website that you should be fine without changing it.
Yeah, but that's first result. So you're saying if you're not first result, then you would change it.
I wouldn't say first. I would say first page.
Oh, first page. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think that kind of completes our pre-acquisition date. So we're going to kind of do this in two parts. So I think, Tanner, do you have anything else that you would like to add to our, because I have a few questions for you, but do you have anything that you'd like to talk about pre-closing that we haven't discussed already?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, and in any of the episodes you've listened to prior, is there anything that maybe you heard that you want to, maybe you had a different perspective or anything like that?
I think that acquisitions, there's just so many variables like everything else in dentistry that one person's opinion is going to vary from the next person's opinion. And so that's the reason why podcasts are great, because you can go through and you can listen to a bunch of different opinions on different things. Obviously, no one has one right way over the other, but I think that for one person coming in, you're going to do it once. You're going to have that experience, and that experience is going to be completely different than everyone else's. So as far as saying this is wrong and this is right, I don't have anything that pops to the top of my head. I think you just kind of play it by ear and be flexible as you're doing it. Don't go in and expect it to be one exact way, and because chances are it's going to be 180 degrees different. So,
and I'm really happy you said that, because I think that kind of justifies what we're doing. And like right now, you just said the team members, you guys now moved them up to pre-acquisition based on your experience. I think kind of everyone has different experiences, and especially I know 5 is a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not enough to really kind of see what it's like every time, where they seem very predictable. So I think it's kind of cool that you're tweaking it as you go, and we get that unique perspective. I did have a question for you about insurance credentialing, though, because it wasn't on the pre-acquisition date list, and that's something that I had a broker that you've worked with, Marie Chatterley, on to talk about. So I'm curious to see kind of what your feelings are about insurance credentialing and where you guys put it in.
Yeah. So like you said, I mean, these are things that we tweak all the time. That is something that should be on this list. This list was created after our 4th one. And so it was kind of in retrospect of, okay, what kind of things do we need to do differently? Insurance credentialing, I would definitely go ahead and put that in the pre-acquisition checklist. And we'll go ahead and edit this one. So we'll send out the more updated version, but I would definitely start with credentialing before you take over. So
is that something that if you're adding offices, you have to do as like the same way somebody buying their first practice would have to do it for every acquisition?
So like Marie said, it is provider-based and not office-based. And so we will credential the office, and that's a lot easier because they're all owned by my partner who is credentialed already in the state of Colorado. We just need to add on locations. But when we put in like the new associate doctor in there, we have to go in and do a full credentialing for him if he's coming from out of state. And so the process is just as if you were a new grad to get in there as well.
So when you're credentialing and like you're keeping the seller on, that's something I'm doing. That's something that we've had, Ike on the podcast is going to be doing. So how does that work? Do you have any idea? I know you guys haven't done it yet, but so they're already credentialed. You just have to get credentialed. Is that how you would imagine it would work?
No, well, a lot of the insurance companies, they want it to be under your EIN number. And so as you buy it and you keep your seller on, it's going to change your EIN number. So you're going to want to contact them and just let them know that there's been a transition of ownership. You'll credential yourself and your wife, in your situation. And then you're also going to want to go ahead and move his credentials to your EIN number. And I'm not an insurance expert, so I wouldn't be able to say for sure that's exactly how it works. But if I were to go ahead and handle that right now, that's what we would do. We would go in, we would credential the office under the new ownership, and then we would say that he is now associated with that ownership.
Gotcha. And have you guys dealt with any Delta Premier offices?
Yeah, our first one was Delta Premier.
So can you comment on that? How is Colorado? Is Colorado accepting new Premier providers or no?
They are, but at that point, the seller doctor was only working 4 days a week. So 3 days a week, 3 days a week. And we wanted to open it to at least 4. So we went ahead and credentialed with a lot of PPOs that she wasn't credentialed with before. So we didn't transition it from Premier to Premier only. I've never heard anything that they weren't accepting just Premier. So I imagine that wouldn't have been a problem if we wanted to do that. That's just not how we did it.
So if you're buying a Premier practice and keeping the seller on, and you're not allowed to register for Premier, do you think the seller at that point would also not be allowed to use Premier? I know you're not an expert, but I just kind of want to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I don't think that there should be a problem. So with my experience with Delta Dental credentialing, you sign either 2 or 1 agreement. So you sign whether you want to be a Premier or a PPO agreement. And I've never heard or even seen that they were limiting people that just wanted to be a Premier. I don't know if that's different state to state. I know that Delta Dental of Colorado is pretty expensive right now. that they are accepting. I mean, well, all insurances are accepting, but I know that they are growing right now just based off of the amount of patients that they've brought on. I guess not patients; they're what are they? Clients of theirs.
Okay.
But anyway, so for our situation, it wouldn't be a problem. I don't think if we wanted to do just a premier one in Colorado, right? It might be state to state.
Yeah, I know in Arizona they've cut it off, but I guess they're adding employers, so they have a abundance of patients. At the beginning of the episode, I talked about the conversations that I had with Richard before coming on as the co-host of this podcast. One of the motivations I had for doing what I do now is to help make information more accessible to everybody than it was for me when I tried to get all this information. And in the process of doing this podcast and helping people look at practices for more than 2 years now, I've learned a lot, and I've looked at a lot of practices. I've been very fortunate. And so I've always wanted to make a course geared towards somebody who's looking to buy a practice, and Richard wanted to do the same thing. So what we did was I teamed up with Paul Goodman. Most of you know Paul is a dentist and a broker in the Northeast, and we set up a comprehensive course that goes through the whole process of from the moment that you decide to buy a practice to early ownership. It goes through the entire process, finding deals, negotiating deals, getting deals done with lawyers, and I felt like I needed somebody like Paul to do the course with me to make sure that we're covering everything comprehensively. And then not only will we have Paul participating in the course, we're also going to have a banker, David Alvey, lawyer, Rob Montgomery. We're going to have a buyer's consultant, Brian Pinder. We have professionals in their own areas because I didn't feel like Paul or I could really cover the entire topic. And so for more information on this course, we're going to be announcing it on our Facebook page, the podcast, and our email list. And for those of you who have been waiting on our waiting list, I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we're going to be offering a promotion to those who have been waiting as a thank you for being patient with us. And for the first 50 people to sign up for the course, they'll be saving 25% of the total price. To sign up for our waiting list, you can still do it before the course is released on a link in the description below that is for our waiting list. So don't miss out on the Ownership Accelerator, and they need to have providers for them. But I have a question for you about, you talked about team members and increasing hours. That's something that a lot of our listeners are, that buy a practice plan is to expand hours. And, that was my plan before I talked to Justin Short and kind of changed my philosophy a little bit. But, what do you say to those people who are going to go in and tell them, okay, we're expanding hours, we're going to now stay late, and how do you think they would have that conversation with the team?
So I think that this is a great point to bring up, George. Right now we are at a point where the things that we're talking about after the acquisition date going forward, it is very variable, and you need to fill it out depending on the staff. I would not suggest going in and doing all of these changes at once. If you do that before you even have the staff's confidence in you, chances are they're still going to keep looking and possibly even leave you, which is not what you want getting into a new office. So I would get in there, I would fill out the staff. I personally would work it for 3 to 6 months before I do any of these huge radical changes like change hours. I'd fill it out, let them garnish respect for you, you garnish respect for them, and then I would start, once you have that relationship built with them, then start having those conversations that you talked about. And then it'll be a lot more natural because you'll be able to learn during that time, how do these people react to certain situations and how should I go in and handle it?
Okay. I think our listeners should hear that. I think that's a great point. And it's something that I've kind of realized, in hindsight, and I'm not even changing my hours at all. That's the plan. But, if I was going to, I think I would cool it a little bit and just kind of get to know the office, get to know the staff, and then kind of build that goodwill and then start doing things that I may feel have a bigger effect on, product profitability and all those things I'm going for.
Right.
So
Definitely.
The last thing I want to talk about before we kind of carry over until the post-acquisition, the next episode, is I want to talk about I don't know how to say it, but like the timeline and I guess the trigger shy, our listeners maybe. I think a lot of first-time buyers, in my experience, have been a little shy to pull the trigger on that first practice. And do you have any advice for them, given the fact that you've done 5? I think for you guys, those group people, it's a lot easier because you're looking to grow and you're maybe a little bit more trigger happy. than the first-time buyer who this is going to be their job for the next 30 years. What do you say to somebody who's shy on pulling the trigger on a practice?
Yeah, so if you're shy of pulling the trigger, chances are it's because you're afraid or you have some type of fear, not necessarily that you're driven by it. And I think that the biggest way to get rid of that fear is to educate yourself as much as possible. So this checklist that we've sent out to everyone, it is there so that you guys can use it as a resource to know exactly what type of things do I need to do to make sure that I can help alleviate any of this unknown that I have. And so by going in and being able to say, okay, I know that I need to do X, Y, and Z, that should help alleviate a lot of that fear that you are experiencing in pulling the trigger. So if you've got a map laid out of exactly things that you need to do, that should definitely help, as you said, George, help you pull the trigger.
And I think another reason why people might be a little hesitant to buy a specific practice is because I think is this practice good enough? I think people ask themselves that question. So, what would you say to somebody like that where they're not sure, they don't know what a practice that's good enough looks like? We've looked at a lot of them, but, if somebody hasn't, what do you say to that person? Like, how do you know if the practice is worth submitting an offer and buying,
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you guys talked about on that lifestyle practice episode. If you have clearly defined what it is that you want out of your office, then you should be able to have a good sense of, is this office going to be a good fit for me or not? That doesn't mean, I think for some people, they're going to take 2 years to find that perfect practice. And I think that that's fine for some people. And some people are ready to pull the trigger within the next 6 months. And obviously, you're going to have to be a lot more lenient of, does this fit my perfect profile or not? Unfortunately, because of the DSO model growing as fast as it is, the perfect practices are being snatched up before they even hit brokers. And so you're going to have to be a lot more lenient. But the good thing about dentistry is it really takes a lot to sync a dental practice. As long as you know how to go in and you can do simple things like be a dentist and you have good clinical skills and then you also have good soft skills such as talking to your patients well and creating rapport with them. It takes a lot to make a dental office unsuccessful. So I think that should be kind of a comfort for you going into it and knowing that maybe this practice isn't exactly what you want, but it still will most likely be a successful practice for you.
I'm really, really happy you said that. I think you touched on some really good points. First, I think just the overall inefficiency of the business of dentistry kind of is very forgiving to, we're not the restaurant industry. So I think that's very nice. But I think the other things you said is the importance of, I think you kind of justified our going into off-market deals and how to find them, because I think you can, maybe have an advantage against all the people using brokers if you can go off-market, like those next 3 deals that you talked about. But then also that last thing of, if somebody's coming to me or to whoever saying, I'm not sure if this practice is a good fit, maybe it's because their predefined goals or vision for what their practice is going to look like isn't well defined. I'm really happy you said that, and I never thought about it that way. And I was always wondering, why when I looked at the practice I'm buying, it was so easy for me to say, yep, that's it. And I think it was probably a combination of the number I'd seen and exactly what I wanted it to look like. I had a checklist and it fit it. So I'm happy you said that. And I think that's very valuable. If there's, one thing pre-deciding the practice to think about, I think it's just what Tanner said right there. So I'm really happy you said that, Tanner. And I thought that was a great point. And we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your pre-acquisition list. Is there anything that you want to add pre-closing before we talk about it next episode?
No, just building off of the last comment you said, though, George, I do think that it is important to define what it is that you want. I would definitely sit down and do that before you get into even starting to look for practices, because if you get in and you have a model defined of what you want your practice to look like, you'll be able to go in and you define those things, but at the same time, you'll be able to say, okay, this is less important to me, this is less important to me. And so you'll be able to make a little bit of negotiations as you start looking at practices and realize that perfect practice is not out there. You'll be able to say, okay, well, I don't want to negotiate on the number of ops I have, for example, but I am willing to negotiate on how many hours a day that they were working or something like that. And so I think that it is good to go through that process, but it's not going to be the deciding factor for finding that office.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable. Just kind of having your, the things you're flexible on and the things that you're like have to be at least for ops. For me, ops is kind of something I'm very fixed on. So I think that's great. I really appreciate it. Anything else, Tanner, before we go on to the next episode?
Nope.
Alrighty. Well, then we appreciate you guys tuning in. That list will be available to you now, and then I guess you'll have a little sneak peek to what's coming up next episode with that list. Okay.
Okay, that was a great part 1 in this 2-part series with Tanner Applegate. So George, why did you like this episode so much?
Well, when I think about podcasts, I'm a little bit different, and I like, really dense podcasts that have a lot of information. And part of the reason why I was so excited about doing this podcast with you is because I got to make episodes that I would listen to myself.
Yeah.
That I would really enjoy. And this is kind of like both of these, but this is the first one, are just like exactly what I meant when I felt that and when I say that. And so I hope that you guys felt the same way.
So it's not like 95% introducing the person and making a couple jokes, and then you finally get to 5 minutes of content and then the episode's over?
Yeah, no, not 95% build up with like a 2-sentence, of value. No, that is not what I like.
No, okay. We'll work on that. No, this you have delivered. Tanner delivered. This was great. So Tanner, his group seems to be a little bit different than other groups. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's going to be really cool when Hunter's group, Dr. Will Little comes on and they talk about it, because Tanner is so culturally driven, like I've never heard of looking at the culture of the practice before you acquire it that much, but for him it was a huge deal. And so I think that was a really interesting perspective. And then the other thing I really got from this interview was just kind of trying to get everything done as soon as you can. I think that was kind of a big takeaway, I think, from pre-closing, where, this stuff sometimes you have to wait till after closing, but anything you can take care of, just take care of it immediately. And, we have that list on our resources page. But, I just think that's kind of the two biggest things. Tanner's company is so culturally driven. I thought that was really cool. And then also just getting stuff done as soon as possible.
No, absolutely. And I feel like the episode we had with those D3s where their whole like philosophy influenced the practice they ended up getting reminded me a lot of this. And the fact that you can have such a specific cultural vision and translate that into the practice that you want and multiple practices that you want was extremely inspirational for me. So great episode, great specific content. And we're looking forward to part 2 next week. The one thing I'll say, we were pretty ecstatic last episode when we realized how many reviews we had. Thank you to everyone who's mentioned George. Please continue to mention George in the reviews. His feelings get hurt when they just mention me. Okay.
That's not true. It's just I was looking through the iTunes reviews, and it was like, I had, granted I've only been here for 3 months.
I know,
but like,
George.
we had like
give it
12,
some time.
15 reviews, and only one of them even remotely mentioned me. And I was thinking, come on, guys. Yeah, I'm doing stuff too. So
you're doing most of stuff these days. George is carrying the brunt of the podcast load. So I really appreciate it. So please give George the many shout outs that he deserves. If his content has in any way benefited you, or if he's helped you look at a practice or anything like that, just one small way to give him thanks would be a review with a little shout out to George.
I appreciate that, Richard. Means a lot.
Awesome. Cool. We'll talk with you guys next week on the Shared Practices podcast.